a darkened parchment codex, written in Ge'ez and preserved through the Ethiopian manuscript tradition, carries one of the strangest surviving visions of heaven. Its pages do not describe a single open sky. They describe walls of crystal, floors like fire, a great house, and beyond it, a second chamber surrounding the throne of the great glory. Then comes the tension. The text states that no angel could enter that inner place or look upon his face. So the basic claim is real, but narrower than the title suggests. First Enoch presents heaven as a guarded, layered realm. Access is not equal. Some beings stand outside. One human visionary is brought near, and the innermost presence remains forbidden even to the heavenly host. The scene appears in 1 Enoch 14 within the Book of the Watchers, a work known not only from later Ethiopic copies, but also from much earlier Aramaic fragments found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. Yet the surviving evidence creates three difficult questions. Is Enoch describing literal architecture, symbolic temple imagery, or a visionary language combining both? Why is a mortal permitted to approach where angels may not, and does the prohibition apply to all angels? Or only to entry into the immediate presence of God? The manuscript does not answer those questions in modern terms. It gives images, boundaries, and fear. But one detail is unmistakable: heaven, in this account, has an inside, and even celestial beings can be kept outside. The boundary becomes clear when the surviving witnesses are placed side by side. The account belongs to the section scholars call the Book of the Watchers, preserved complete in Ge'ez as part of 1 Enoch, but also represented by Aramaic fragments from Qumran. Among them are manuscripts catalogued as 4Q201 and 4Q204 copied in the Second Temple period, centuries before the medieval Ethiopic codices that preserve the full work. Those fragments matter because they show that the heavenly journey was not a late Ethiopian invention. The tradition already circulated in Aramaic among Jewish readers before the destruction of the Second Temple. Yet the fragments are incomplete. They confirm the antiquity of the composition, but they do not preserve every line of the throne vision in a continuous form. For the fullest wording of chapter 14, modern translations depend mainly on the Ethiopic textual tradition. Compared where possible with Greek and Aramaic witnesses, the text places Enoch in a landscape of wind, fire, crystal, and immense structures. He approaches a first house whose walls appear like mosaic crystal, and whose floor burns like fire. Beyond it stands a greater house, more magnificent and terrifying. Inside is a throne, streams of flame, and the presence called the Great Glory. Thousands stand before him, but they do not enter the inner chamber. This language resembles temple architecture, outer space, inner space, and a restricted divine presence. Some scholars therefore read the vision as a heavenly counterpart to the Jerusalem temple. Others stress that it is still an apocalypse, a visionary revelation whose images are symbolic rather than architectural measurements. The source survives across languages, but not without gaps. And those gaps matter, because the identity of the beings kept outside depends on a single question. What exactly does the text mean by enter? The word does not describe a corridor closed by a guard. It describes a threshold created by presence itself. In 1 Enoch 14, the visionary falls on his face as he is carried toward the greater house. Its entrance is open before him, yet terror prevents him from crossing freely. He is raised, brought near, and shown the interior. Around the throne are streams of fire. The text states that 10,000 times 10,000 stand before the great glory, while those closest to the divine presence remain unable to look directly upon him. The architecture is therefore not merely decorative, it organizes rank. The first house can be approached, the greater house can be seen, the throne can be described. But access narrows at each stage, like concentric courts around an ancient sanctuary. Enoch advances only because he has been summoned to receive judgment against the Watchers, the angels accused of descending, taking human wives, and corrupting the earth. That purpose changes the scene. Enoch is not admitted as a permanent resident of the inner chamber. He enters as a messenger under command. The text portrays his access as exceptional, temporary, and dangerous. He trembles, His body weakens. Even before the divine voice addresses him, the vision makes clear that proximity is not privilege without consequence. Some scholars interpret this as priestly imagery transferred into heaven. In the Jerusalem temple, sacred space was arranged by degrees, with entry restricted according to status and function. First Enoch may be using that familiar structure to express a cosmic hierarchy, but the evidence does not prove that the author intended a precise map of heaven. The scene is visionary, and its physical language may function symbolically. Still, the implication is difficult to avoid. The beings excluded are not rebels waiting outside in chains. They are heavenly attendants who stand before God and yet do not cross the final boundary. Enoch, a human, is brought closer because he carries a judicial commission. So the question is no longer simply who is forbidden to enter. It is why the forbidden boundary opens for Enoch at all. The answer begins with the crime that brought Enoch to the threshold. In the Book of the Watchers, the rebellious angels do not merely disobey. They cross a boundary. They leave their appointed place, descend to earth, take wives, teach forbidden arts, and produce violence that spreads through human society. Their transgression is spatial as well as moral. They move from the heavenly order into a realm where they do not belong. Enoch's ascent reverses that movement. The Watchers descend without permission. Enoch is taken upward by command. They enter the human world to satisfy desire and alter its order. He enters the heavenly court to carry a verdict back to them. The contrast is deliberate. The same narrative that condemns angels for crossing downward boundaries allows a human to cross upward boundaries, but only as an authorized envoy. This makes the inner chamber more than a hidden room. It becomes the center of judgment. According to 1 Enoch 14 and 15, the Great Glory commissions Enoch to rebuke the Watchers and announce that their petition will not be accepted. They had asked him to write a memorial on their behalf, hoping for mercy. Instead, the human messenger receives the sentence that the angels themselves are not permitted to hear directly from inside the divine presence. The hierarchy has inverted. Immortal beings wait for a mortal to return with God's decision. Some scholars interpret this reversal as part of the text's polemic against the Watchers. Their heavenly origin does not guarantee access. Status can be lost through rebellion. Enoch's humanity does not disqualify him when he acts under divine authority. The evidence does not establish a universal rule that humans outrank angels. It presents one exceptional commission in one visionary narrative. But the account adds a darker implication. The forbidden beings are not excluded because they lack knowledge of heaven. They are excluded because they once belonged to its order and violated it. The chamber is secret not simply because it is hidden, but because access reveals allegiance. And if rebellion can close a heavenly door, what else might determine who is allowed to stand before it? The next clue is hidden in the wording of the throne room scene. English translations often make the boundary sound absolute. The angels could not enter and could not look upon the great glory. But the surviving textual tradition reaches us through several languages, and small differences in phrasing can shift the emphasis from physical exclusion to ritual unworthiness, fear, or inability to endure the divine presence. That distinction is crucial. A locked chamber implies prohibition imposed from outside. An unbearable presence implies a limit within the beings themselves. In 1 Enoch 14, fire surrounds the throne. Garments shine more brightly than the sun, and the house appears built from tongues of flame. The text does not describe guards, doors being sealed, or a spoken command forbidding entry. Instead, the heavenly attendants stand before the throne, while Enoch collapses in terror and must be raised. Some scholars therefore interpret the scene through ancient temple language. The innermost sanctuary was not ordinary space. Access depended on appointment, purity, and function. In that reading, the angels are not necessarily criminals being denied entry. They remain in their assigned station, while Enoch is temporarily admitted because his message requires it. Another interpretation stresses visionary rhetoric. Apocalyptic texts often describe divine glory as overwhelming to emphasize the distance between creation and creator. The chamber may not be a secret room in the modern sense. It may be a literary image for the inaccessible center of divine authority. The evidence cannot decide the matter completely. The Ethiopic manuscripts preserve the full scene. while earlier Aramaic fragments confirm the antiquity of the composition but do not give us an undamaged, complete parallel for every line. A small translation choice, therefore, carries a large implication were the angels forbidden by decree, restrained by sacred order, or simply unable to survive what lay beyond the threshold. Modern conservation science cannot tell us whether Enoch entered heaven, but it can show how the vision itself survived. Under multispectral imaging, faded ink on ancient parchment can sometimes become legible when ordinary light reveals almost nothing. Different wavelengths separate ink from darkened skin, expose erased strokes, and clarify letters hidden beneath stains or surface damage. The result is not a recovered photograph of the heavenly chamber. It is a more precise record of what ancient copyists actually wrote. This matters because apocalyptic texts often survive in fragments. At Qumran, the Aramaic copies of Enoch were found as broken pieces, not complete books resting intact on a shelf. Scholars identify joins, compare handwriting, reconstruct lines, and test readings against later Greek and Ethiopic witnesses. A single visible letter can support one reconstruction and weaken another. Yet every reconstruction must remain marked as reconstruction. Paleography adds another layer to it. By comparing letter forms, spacing, and scribal habits, specialists estimate when a manuscript was copied. These methods place several Enoch manuscripts within the centuries before the Common Era, confirming that the tradition is ancient. They do not prove that the visionary journey occurred, or that heaven contains literal chambers. Physical dating establishes the age of the copy, not the truth of the vision. The parallel is still revealing. The text describes knowledge divided by thresholds, what can be seen, what can be approached, and what remains hidden. Modern imaging encounters a similar pattern on the manuscript surface. One layer is visible to the eye. Another appears only under controlled light. A third may be lost because the parchment is broken away entirely. This is an analogy, not evidence for the architecture of heaven, but it exposes the central problem of the investigation. Our access to Enoch's claim is itself restricted by damaged material, translation, and transmission. We are examining a text about forbidden sight through manuscripts that reveal their contents only in degrees. And when modern technology recovers a forgotten letter, it may clarify the wording fully without resolving the mystery behind it. The conflict did not begin with modern skepticism. It began inside the history of transmission itself. The Book of Enoch was known in ancient Jewish circles, as the Qumran fragments demonstrate, and parts of its language later echoed in early Christian writings. The Epistle of Jude even cites a prophecy attributed to Enoch. Yet, broad Jewish and Christian canon traditions did not preserve First Enoch as scripture, while the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church did. That difference is often described as suppression. The evidence is less dramatic and more complicated. No surviving record shows a single council banning the book everywhere. The Council of Nicaea did not remove it from the Bible. Instead, its authority varied by community, language, and period. Some early Christian writers treated Enoch as valuable, or even authoritative. Tertullian defended it, though he acknowledged that others did not accept it. Later writers were more cautious, especially as questions grew about its authorship, its angelology, and its absence from the Hebrew canon recognized by many Jewish communities. Transmission followed those judgments. Greek copies became rare. A small Latin portion survived. The complete work remained preserved in Ge'ez through Ethiopian Christianity. Elsewhere, the text was not necessarily destroyed. It was copied less, read less, and eventually became inaccessible to most Western readers. That history changes the meaning of the forbidden chamber. In one tradition, Enoch's ascent remained part of Scripture. In others, it became material outside the canon, useful for understanding ancient belief but not for defining doctrine. The disagreement was therefore not only about whether heaven contained chambers, it was about who could speak with authority concerning them. Modern scholarship approaches the question differently. It asks when the work was composed, how its sections developed, and what communities used it. These methods can reconstruct reception history. They cannot decide theological inspiration. So the text survived, but under unequal conditions. One branch of Christianity kept the door open. Others allowed it to close gradually. And that raises a historical question as unsettling as the vision itself. When a text disappears from common use, is its mystery rejected, forgotten, or merely transferred elsewhere? The present-day mystery begins with what is missing. No complete Aramaic copy of 1st Enoch survives from Qumran, and the throne vision reaches us through a broken chain of witnesses. Fragments confirm that the work circulated in the Second Temple period, but the exact wording of every line in chapter 14 cannot be checked against a single, continuous early manuscript. That leaves scholars comparing pieces across languages. Ethiopic preserves the full account. Greek witnesses preserve portions of 1st Enoch. Aramaic fragments preserve earlier forms of the text, but often with damaged edges, incomplete lines, and uncertain joins. In textual criticism, agreement among these witnesses can strengthen confidence. Disagreement can reveal development, scribal change, or translation difficulty. Silence, however, is harder to interpret. A missing line may reflect loss, not absence from the original. The identity of those excluded from the inner chamber remains tied to this problem. Are they all angels standing in reverence, a specific order of heavenly attendants, or beings whose access is limited by function rather than punishment? The surviving wording supports hierarchy and restricted approach, but it does not provide a modern catalog of celestial ranks, nor has archaeology uncovered a physical model that can be identified as Enoch's heavenly house. Temple layouts, throne imagery, and ancient Near Eastern descriptions of divine courts provide context, not confirmation. Similarity can illuminate the author's world without proving a direct blueprint. The manuscript evidence therefore creates an unusual limit. It is strong enough to show that ancient readers encountered this vision long before the complete Ethiopic copies now available to us. It is not complete enough to eliminate every ambiguity in the scene. Somewhere between the broken Aramaic fragments and the preserved Ethiopic text, one question remains open: did the earliest form describe a prohibition, an incapacity, or a boundary whose meaning has shifted in translation? Now, an important distinction is necessary. The physical evidence proves that writings attributed to Enoch circulated among Jewish communities before the Common Era. Aramaic fragments from Qumran establish the antiquity of the tradition, while later Ethiopic manuscripts preserve the complete heavenly journey. That is manuscript evidence. It does not prove that Enoch entered a literal structure beyond the sky. The textual evidence is more specific. 1st Enoch 14 describes 2 houses, burning floors, crystal-like walls, a throne surrounded by fire, and heavenly attendants who do not enter the innermost presence. Enoch is brought forward because he must receive judgment against the watchers. That is what the surviving account states. Interpretation begins after that point. Temple imagery may explain the layered architecture. Priestly restrictions may illuminate the boundary. The contrast between the watcher's unauthorized descent and Enoch's authorized descent may explain why a human advances where angels remain outside. These readings are plausible, but they are not physical discoveries of celestial rooms. Speculation goes further. The text does not identify secret chambers containing lost technology, imprisoned beings, or hidden records of human history. No archaeological site confirms such claims. No surviving manuscript says that every angel is permanently forbidden from God's inner court. Later traditions may expand the imagery, but they must not be substituted for the wording of 1st Enoch. If the early Aramaic tradition contains substantially the same throne vision preserved in Ethiopic, and if the houses represent a heavenly sanctuary ordered by degrees of access, then the larger question becomes why authority, rather than nature, determines who may cross the final threshold. The Watchers possess heavenly origin, but lose the right to approach. Enoch possesses mortal weakness, but receives temporary admission. The chamber therefore functions as a test of obedience, commission, and proximity to judgment. Its secret is not necessarily what lies behind a wall. Its secret may be the rule governing who can pass. That distinction preserves the mystery without turning a visionary text into a map or an excavation report. But the oldest surviving evidence is broken precisely where modern certainty would be most valuable, leaving the boundary visible while its full meaning remains beyond reach. The parchment returns us to the beginning, a vision copied across centuries, carried through languages, preserved in fragments, and kept complete within the Ethiopian tradition. The physical evidence still exists. Ink remains on animal skin. Broken Aramaic pieces remain linked to the ancient work. Gay's manuscripts still preserve the account of crystal walls, burning floors, and a throne approached through fear. Nothing in those objects proves that heaven contains rooms measurable like earthly chambers. Yet they prove that ancient communities preserved a vision in which sacred space had boundaries, authority governed access, and even heavenly beings did not move freely before the divine presence. Enoch crosses that boundary only because he is summoned, the Watchers. Once members of the heavenly order, remain outside because their descent violated it. The text does not offer a diagram. It offers a judgment origin, does not guarantee admission, and knowledge does not equal permission. The chamber therefore remains secret in two senses. Its interior is hidden within the vision, and its full meaning is obscured by damaged witnesses. Translation and interpretation. The fragments have survived. The threshold has survived with them. But if the door opens only by divine commission, who, in the world imagined by Enoch, is truly forbidden to enter?